This is Transqat, a safe space to stand. Transgender issues, queer people, respectful conversations. I'm host Claire McCarthy. Welcome to Transqat.
I'm Wendy Cole. I am a transition mentor. I guide people through significant life changes, and with a focus on self-acceptance and personal growth, I help them achieve their goals. The clients that I work with, I assist clients who are in transition from their gender assigned at birth to the opposite, and I also work with parents of transgender. And I also work with women entrepreneurs who are suffering from imposter syndrome and self-doubts. I know a lot about that. I started my transition actually in 2015, and I knew Trump was running, and I decided to put the pedal down and just go as fast as I could and get as much done as I could before he took office. And I did. It took me 6 months to transition. That's it. I hadn't cross-dressed in over 35 years. I hadn't done anything. I didn't even know that there was a transgender community.
So it was Trump's candidacy for the 2016 election that provided motivation, or was there more?
There was more behind that.
Yeah.
I was 67 years old. I was done repressing this. I had repressed this from the early 1970s when I tried to transition. I was
Tell me about that, because the 70s, as bad as things are right now, the 70s, we both know, was not a great time to be trans.
No. In fact, the psychiatrist that was working with me at the time took me to a group of psychiatrists that met every quarter in a hospital conference room in Schenectady, New York. I walk into this meeting as a case study patient. I'm talking about my life. One of the psychiatrists, there was at least 15 to 20 of them there, and one of them stands up, says, I've heard all I need to hear this quarter. I'll see you all next quarter. Looks at me and says, you're a freak. You should move to New York City and turn tricks like the rest of them. I didn't even understand what that meant. That's how little I knew. There was no internet. There was no information about any of this. I went through my college library, through several university libraries looking for information. There really wasn't any.
What did that look like? What did that feel like when you were a kid, when you were an adolescent, in this period when, as you say, even the mental health professionals had no context for this, certainly were not inclined to be supportive. What did that look like for you?
After that event in the hospital as a case study patient, my psychiatrist said to me, your diagnosis technically is, this is how you were born. There is no treatment. There is no cure. And Claire, it didn't change until 2012.
If you follow the language in the DSM, right up until version 5, it was that what we were doing, what we were feeling was what was wrong and it needed to be fixed. And finally, by the time they get to DSM-5, the language becomes gender identity is what it is. It's that society puts the pressure on us. And that's where the problems come in. It's not inherent to us.
Well, I was born in the middle of the last century. I was pronounced and assigned male at birth because they go by the physical anatomy. That's just the sex organ. That's not your gender identity. Gender identity is between the ears, not the legs. Big difference. The gender identity and sexual orientation are formed in the second trimester of birth. Sexual orientation is wired up in the amygdala part of the brain. Gender identity is wired up in the frontal cortex of the brain. For most people, fortunately for them, everything's congruent. The sexual orientation, the gender identity, and the physical sex are all congruent with how they're all wired up. In our case, things got a little different. Gender identity got wired up And because I believe gender is a continuum, a spectrum, and no one is 100% female or 100% male. We all have traits from both, and there's an overlap. When you're born, there's a preponderance of where you actually are on the spectrum. Well, I got wired up way into the female side. So by the time I hit age 3 and 4, I knew I was different. No words for it, but I knew. See, when the doctor pronounces you as male or female when you're born, that's when parental socialization starts, and the family. And then you get to the school. By the time I got to grammar school or kindergarten, as it was called, boys line up over there, girls line up over there. And yeah, I belong over there, but no, I have to be over here. And by the way, because of all that socialization that I've been experiencing so far, I knew if I said I was really a girl, it wouldn't be good.
Who did you hang out with as a kid? Who were your friends? I mean, gender-wise.
I've actually preferred to be with the girls. I had my mother took me on play dates. This was before school. While she was with her friends, I was playing with their children. Most of my mother's friends' children were girls. And I had a blast. I had my dolly. I don't know where Dolly came from, but that was my favorite toy. Well, of course, my father comes along and takes it away from me. But I enjoyed playing with the girls. By the time I hit age 10, somewhere in that ballpark, I couldn't take it anymore. I was done. In hindsight now, when I look at it, most LGBT people only come out as a means of survival. We got to a point where we just can't take the incongruence anymore, be it your sexual orientation or your gender identity. And you have to come out to survive. In 2014, late 2014, I was going to kill myself. I was done. I had been repressing this from the early 70s for 4.5 decades. The only person in that entire time frame that I ever talked to about how I felt about who I was my ex-wife. We talked in 1978. I was talking in my sleep about being a woman. She woke me up demanding an explanation. And I was beside myself. I got married because that's what I was always told would fix me. The psychiatrist at age 10 that my parents took me to, and every doctor in between, and everyone that I ever knew. Once you have a career, you have a wife, you have a house, you have a family, you'll forget all about being a girl. I knew that was bullshit, but I tried. I was called a freak by the doctors, and that was the end of it. And what I found out was they were right. My only two options back then was live underground in Manhattan, and like the good doctor said, until I could find some other means of supporting myself, sex work.
It's easy for cisgender heterosexual people, especially back in the 70s and 80s, to sort of turn your nose up at sex work. But if you were going to be out, if you were going to be living authentically, there was no way to get a 9-to-5. There was no way that a corporation was going to hire you. I mean, if you were really, really fortunate and had passing privilege and you could live stealth, maybe.
Interestingly enough about that, I met a woman who had transitioned in 1978. We're talking. I found her on social media, and we got on a Zoom session together, and we were talking. And what really surprised me, she said she envied me.
Why?
And I said, why? You transitioned way back when, and you've been enjoying it ever since. She said, what I didn't know when I did that was I was swapping one closet for another closet. I had to leave family, friends, and everything I owned behind and just pop up some other place as myself. And I couldn't tell the people that knew me that way about my past. and I couldn't tell my people from my past what had happened to me and where I'd gone. And I've also talked with quite a number of other people, not as old as dirt as me, but
Careful, you're only a couple of years older than me.
I didn't transition back then because there was no way to live within society as a normal human being.
Yeah.
It was not possible. And to have a career, to have a corporate job or anything like that, forget it. The girls that I have met that were doing this back in the 80s and 90s, they were either working as servers, bartenders, or sex work. That's it. Those were the options. Oh, and by the way, back then too, no estrogen, no medical support, nothing.
The medical care that we think of when we say gender affirming care, there was nothing like that in the
It didn't exist until 2012, and barely. Obama gave us health care coverage by making transgender health care part of insurance. Right? I scrambled through the early stages of my transition to get there, and then started in 2016 looking for a place to have surgery, hopefully get it done before somebody in the administration figured out that it was covered by healthcare and ended that.
There were a lot of people a lot of trans folks who in 2015, as they saw this war against trans people coming, rushed their transition for fear that the opportunity would be taken away completely. I've heard that story again and again. Given what we're going into now for the next 4 years, it's likely we'll be hearing that again. And you can speak to this because you work with people in transitions.
Right.
But when you're in a situation like that, you're not making the best possible decisions. You are making decisions based on what you think you can get away with given the circumstances. And that's not necessarily the right decision.
Exactly. Right now, if anyone was starting with their, I know, in fact, I know one person, she's going through her legal name change process now. She'll make it. She'll get through and everything will be done. But, Lord knows what's going to happen after this. I decided on Wednesday that the only thing I can do is just keep going, even ramp it up, because one of the things I did was I started a group. I met a woman when I started doing podcast interviews. She wanted to interview me for her book. Her name is Lynn Murphy. She wanted to interview me for her book and interview me for her podcast. Well, we did a first interview session, which lasted 4 hours. Over the first 6 months of this year, we recorded 30 more hours. It's evolved. It went from being just one episode for her podcast to a podcast series under her podcast to now a brand new podcast, which I named Demystifying the Transgender Journey. My thought behind this, and this is all before the election and before all the campaigning and everything else started, was the way in which our community needs to gain acceptance by society is to understand us. There's a lot of people in our community that tell me, oh, straight people all hate us. My response to them is, no, they don't. They don't know us. All they know is all the bullshit that they've been told about us. So my experiences during my transition, I did it. I basically did it alone and with my therapist. I did have one or two other transgender friends that I met along the way before I started living full time. By July of 2015, I was in my apartment and living full time. 6 months. Big part of it was I did a lot of work on myself for total self-acceptance, literally deconstructing all that male socialization I was subjected to for decades. Deconstruct all of that and rebuild it back up with the proper mannerisms and behaviors, while I'm also working on my own mindset to accept who I really truly am. And I no longer have to repress it. I don't have to hide anything anymore. And it's wonderful. And it felt great. And I was having a blast. I went from being a highly withdrawn, very antisocial male because I had this big secret to hide from age 10.
Which takes a lot of energy.
All energy.
Yeah.
Everything was focused on this. What cisgender people don't realize is the amount of energy it takes to repress this, to repress who you truly are. And the reason why I always refer to myself as I was born transgender, that's literally how this happened. And being born transgender frames it for straight people, cisgender people, as not a choice. So let's start with that. This is not a choice. It's something I absolutely needed to do. And there's a difference between wanting and needing. I talk to a lot of people in the cross-dressing part of the transgender community. And after one of the events where they've been dressing for a weekend and all of that, they'll say, oh, I wish I could do this full time. No, they're perfectly happy. Most of them continue on cross-dressing occasionally to fulfill the needs they have for that and then go back to their male lives. And yeah, that's fine. If that works for you and that takes care of your needs, great. I have helped some cross-dressing people actually do it better. Actually not be ashamed or embarrassed and actually learn to enjoy it fully.
When you're cross-dressed and you're out in public, if all of your energy is going to this anxiety of, what's going to happen next and why is that person looking at me and am I in danger and do I look ridiculous? There is no enjoyment. You're not really in the moment. You're not doing what you set out to do.
And that's exactly what I help people do, is actually learn to enjoy it and be themselves.
Throughout most of that period, between when you were 10, say, and this disastrous son is joining us for the moment, this disastrous incident with the therapists and the psychiatrists, did you think of yourself as a cross-dresser, or was this just something that you put out of your mind completely? How did you identify?
In terms of identity, I always knew I should have been a girl. Yeah. I always knew I was a girl. But during that time frame, that 45 years, 4.5 decades, I just locked it down as best I could. I had a job in tech, and I immersed myself in the computer world. And it was a great way to hide. In fact, I've met quite a few other transgender people in the tech field. You can work in a corporation and nobody's going to bother you because most people don't want to talk to the geeks.
Just fix my computer, please.
Exactly.
But it is, ironically, or perhaps not, it is a heavily, or at least it was when you were coming up, a heavily male-dominated field.
Oh, very much so. I reinvented myself midstream in that career. I got laid off from Digital Equipment Corporation, which was the second largest computer manufacturing company to IBM in this country. They employed over 180,000 people in New England alone. So I got transferred to Philadelphia, their sales office, to do technical sales support and administrative support and all of that stuff. And then I got laid off in another state far, far away from New England. That was the strategy. Transfer us all everywhere and then lay us off. I reinvented myself after that. I decided I'm done with being an employee. I'm going to do contract and consult. And I taught myself all of the Microsoft technologies. Started with Visual Basic. I went through Microsoft Access. Then I got a copy of Microsoft SQL Server. I bought a Dell server. And through SQL Server on that, I threw the web server software on that. And I started learning how to program websites, web applications for corporations in all the Microsoft technology. And I went to work doing that for my last 15 to 20 years. And I loved every bit of it. I was surrounded day and night by all my computer systems, in my home office. I worked from home most of the time because corporations didn't want to pay for office space for me to be a contract person working there. And anyway, I had a full setup. I could mimic their entire environment with a web server, database server, and all their other systems. It was really a fun thing to do, and I was immersed in that 10 to 12 or 14 hours a day. And I referred to the computers as my silicone life forms. And I learned how to talk to them and make them do things. I got into that because I was inspired by Star Trek and 2001: A Space Odyssey. I loved Hal the computer.
What you're describing as somebody who, is also very much an introvert at heart, it sounds both painfully isolating, but also it sounds like you're describing a safe space.
Right.
You created this space where you could do your thing and be very, very good at it, and you were safe. It's a trade-off.
We all need distractions from this until we actually get to a point where we decide, like I did, face it and just do it. That's one of the things I learned going through this process, is how to control my thoughts, because it's our thoughts and our emotions that are derived from those thoughts that combine to form our beliefs. And you can't live outside your beliefs. And up to that point, I had no belief I could ever do this. My goal when I started was blend into society as any other woman. I had no clue if I could do it. I just came to a realization all of a sudden, and it really hit me too. When January I started therapy, I had a confrontation with my wife at the time, because the rule was then I could have women's clothing and experiment with it at home, but I could never leave the house with it. I came back from my second therapy appointment and I said, I'm going to my therapist next week as Wendy. And she said, no, you're not. And I said, yes, I am. I have to do this. That Thursday morning, I got in my car, backed out of the garage, and drove to therapy as Wendy.
How did that feel, Wendy?
Oh, my God. One of the things that I did for the week leading up to that was a lot of meditation and a lot of visioning. Because if I thought about it, it got scary. So what I needed to do was rewire what I call rewiring my brain to eliminate those thoughts that were scary and substitute, how would I feel driving to work, wearing a dress, a winter coat, heels, because it was January going into February? And what would it feel like walking across the parking lot? How would that feel? Oh, that would feel wonderful. Oh, wow. My reflection in the glass door as I was walking to the building to go in. Oh, and then sitting in the waiting room, waiting for my therapist to come get me with all these other people there. How would all that feel? How would I really enjoy it? And I got to where I could really see myself enjoying that, and it wasn't scary. So that morning I just got dressed, I got in the car, and I go, okay, just enjoy this. Anytime those thoughts come in, block them. I had different techniques to do it for myself. I help people discover their techniques for blocking those thoughts, and just focus on the here and the now, because that's all we really have ever.
Tell me one of those things, because I certainly at many points in my life get that where I can't shut I'm going to say the voices, but it's not like that. It's just,
it's our inner voice.
Dialogue.
We have these whole conversations with ourselves.
Yeah. And there are times where I can't stop them. So in terms of techniques, what are you talking about? One of the things
that, especially if I'm really wired up about something, one of the things that I would do right away is put in my earbuds, put on my sneakers, and go walking fast with the music cranked. And then every time one of those thoughts would pop into my head, I would actually say out loud to stop. And what I had was I would rewrite what my typical thought was, because we have all these thoughts. They're all 90% or more are all the same. So that's one of the things that I also started doing was journaling, but not like in writing a diary and making it all nice and everything. I wrote Every time I had these thoughts and everything that I couldn't do, I would sit there and I would type them into the computer.
Okay.
And I would just not worry about grammar, punctuation, spelling, everything. Ignore all the stuff that Microsoft Word was complaining about.
Clippy popping up in the corner.
In my first 6 months, I wrote over 120 pages, single spaced. But every 4 to 5 days, this was the secret to it. Every 4 to 5 days, I would go back and read what I wrote. That's the power of it. Because now you've got 4 or 5 days that have gone by. You wrote all these things about how horrible your situation is, how scared you are, how you're never going to be able to do this. It's going to be a complete disaster. You've written all this stuff down. And I go back and read it and I go, wow, I don't want to think like that anymore. And then I would start rewriting those thoughts into another format that I could still believe, but it was more supportive.
So rewiring the synapses you've got the physical plus the mental, right? You're typing out the original, you're typing out the new thought. I like that.
And this is what I impress on people who are starting out. That mental work makes all the difference. By the time I was living full time, I went to lunch in a restaurant that I had always wanted to try and my wife never wanted to. I went to lunch there by myself. Had lunch, talked with the server, sat at the bar, had a drink and talked with the bartender. I never even thought of myself as being different. I'm finally living as myself, Wendy. I'm a female, and that's the other thing. A lot of people in our community refer to themselves as trans women. I had a friend that I met recently in another state online. One day she contacted me. She'd been full-time for 8 months at the time. I'm getting misgendered all the time. So we got on a Zoom session. I'm looking at her and I go, you look great. Your hair is great. Your makeup's great. Your clothing's great. Nothing's over the top. You look just like any other woman. And she said, yeah, I don't know. I don't understand. What do I need to do? What do I need? A surgery? I need this. I need facial feminization. I said, your voice is good. You're in that range where it can go either way, and that's good. What are you thinking when you're out running errands and out just being around people? Well, I'm worried about getting misgendered because I'm a trans woman. I said, stop. Lose the word trans from your vocabulary. You didn't want to do this to become a trans woman. You wanted to do this because you feel you are a woman. Because you are thinking of yourself in the back of your mind while you're out as a trans woman. You're thinking, oh boy, how am I going to get misgendered? Who's going to look at me? And I said to her, that's the energy you are holding on to. And that's what you're putting out. People are sensing that from you. They may not know that you were born transgender, but they'll know there's something different about you and they'll look at you. It only takes a few seconds for somebody to identify or assign your gender when they first see you. It's instinctive. They look at you, they take the cues, they say, oh, that's a man or that's a woman. Well, because of how you are carrying yourself and the energy you're putting out to others, they know you're different. Now they're questioning the cues that they saw. Yeah, and that's when you get the sir. So I told her, stop calling yourself a trans woman. She called me back she contacted me about a month later. She goes, I'm not getting misgendered anywhere anymore. That's what she changed, was how she thought of herself. And I said, it has nothing to do with being disloyal to the community, and that transgender, the word transgender, is not a gender identity. It is how we are born, how we choose to live and present, and how we choose to do all of that. That's all contingent on how we were wired up, the extent of feminine we feel or not. It's basically something that even with our own community, we don't understand the power of the human mind.
I had a conversation yesterday with some folks, and the topic of trans women in the bathroom came up. And I was telling them that when I was first sort of actively pursuing how would the real me be in the real world? How do you get from the car to the building? But I was terrified to use the ladies' bathroom because I'm very insecure about my looks and the voice. And I gave off that exactly what you're describing. I gave off this energy of anxiety and nervousness, and anybody who looked at me would have this sweep over them. And it was as if I was saying to them, hey, I don't belong here. Call me on it. Getting to that point took a
requires
lot of
doing
work.
this.
And so that's the sort of thing you do with people. You
exactly.
help them.
And I have also about 7 pages or so of mannerisms and behaviors. And that's one of the things I walk people through as well, because how you carry your body, how you present yourself, how you sit, how you hold a conversation with somebody. Very big differences between male and female. A lot of people, when they start out, they don't address that. That's when you get to those things where people will say, oh, that's a guy in a dress. They're picking up the cue from the behavior. I realize that that person's going to be upset if they hear that statement, but the bottom line is they are bringing it on themselves by the way they are behaving. You used a word before called passing. I really detest that word.
Okay.
It puts way too much pressure, especially on someone who's just beginning. It implies that you are fooling somebody. It implies something negative. I prefer to think of it as, and this is what I work with my clients on, shift your thought pattern to blending in. That way, once we go through all the behaviors and mannerisms and all the stuff about gender identity, and you focus on what you do well and how you present yourself well. And as long as you are somewhere in that line over the center line into the female area with at least half of those mannerisms and behaviors, you're going to be fine.
Hi, folks. For the first 2 years of Transqat, I focused on 2 goals: create quality conversations and maintain a consistent schedule. I've done that. Now I need to turn some of the focus to money. I have no illusions about this show turning a profit. That's for podcasts with a large organization behind them. My goal is simply to make Transqat pay for itself. You get to access the show for free, and it's important to me that this always be the case. But you might not know that there are fees, subscriptions, equipment, and travel costs behind the production. How can you help? Well, on the support menu at transqat.com, select Donate, then hit the PayPal Donate button. You can make it a one-time thing, or you can set up a monthly or even yearly recurring donation. Also on the support menu is an option to sponsor. Your business or organization can sponsor one or a block of episodes in exchange for a 30-second ad and a social media mention. Details are on the site. Listeners, if you know of a business or group that might be a good fit, let me know so I can reach out. Or maybe you could do some of the legwork and ask the next time you're there. If this show has value to you, if you support civil discourse around trans and queer issues, support the show. And as the Scottish woman at the end credits says,
please consider supporting our mission with your monies. Any monkeys will be gratefully received as well.
It's not an absolute, and that's what passing implies. Now, it's complicated. In 2018, 2019, I wasn't visible online. Now, with my coaching work, I spent 2020, the pandemic year, putting all my coaching work and everything online. Website, the whole bit. Social media.
We live in an age where once you make a connection through a dating app, you start Googling to find what you can in order to make sure you're safe.
Exactly.
Yeah. So.
And they can Google my name and things start popping up. I tried in 2021 putting it in my dating profile, that got me what we all call in the community the tranny chasers. And I'm not going to be treated as a fetish. I even had one of my acquaintances tell me before surgery, "Are you sure you really want to do this? You're never going to have sex again." What do you mean? There are guys that come into town that really want to date you, and you could make a lot of money dating them. That was totally out of the question. Since then, all I've ever tried to do and along those lines is just meet someone the old-fashioned organic way. I go out to neighborhood hangouts where I live now in Providence. I go out to neighborhood bars. I go to events, and I go as Wendy. And that's all there is to it. I've also learned over the last 10 years the best way for me to handle it, and this is what I advise my clients to do. Don't reveal yourself right away. Don't tell them you're a trans woman. I learned very quickly how to change my personal pronouns and all of that about my past and kind of tell it so that it all blends and flows. But now, if I let it go for anywhere from a few hours to a few months without telling someone, that's when they get to know me as a person first. And then what I'm finding is people ask me, "Well, what do you do for a living?" So I make something pretty vague about coaching and mindset, and I leave it at that. And I'm very comfortable working with people on career changes because I went through a few myself. I find that technique of letting people get to know me first really works so much better. I have never had anyone mean to me or come back at me with anything negative. The worst thing that ever happens is they just kind of drift away. And that's okay too. A lot of people, this is too much for them to handle. The dichotomy between who I am now and what they found out about me from the past. And if they can't handle that, then I don't need them in my life. The other thing that we have to learn to do is let go. Let go of things from our past. I see a lot of people trying to drag their past through a transition with them, starting with their spouse. It's very nice if you can stay together, but my wife at the time made it abundantly clear, I'm not a lesbian. You're going to develop breasts. Lord knows what else you're going to do. And I'm not going to be married to a woman. So we're getting a divorce. That was sometime about 4 or 5 weeks after I started therapy. It was when I announced that I was going to start hormone replacement therapy. So when she said that, I didn't argue. I respected that. And that's what I tell my clients to do, that they should consider doing. Respect your wife's wishes. She is a heterosexual, cisgender woman expecting to be married to a man. If she says she can't do that, take her at her word and part amicably and let her go.
I have been married 3 times. Each time I made sure to the best of my vocabulary's ability at that time that they knew who I was. And in 2 out of the 3, that was an upfront condition. Same thing you're describing is if this is a hobby, okay, I'll try to tolerate you. If this is something you're looking for in the bedroom, I don't want to hear about it. Don't want to have anything to do with it. And if you ever were to think about pursuing transition, that would be the deal breaker. And I, on the outside, did exactly what you're saying. I said, okay, I respect that. Inside, what I heard was, I don't care about you at all. There's this institution known as dating, known as marriage, known as parenting. That's what I've signed in for. And I could swap you out for anybody at a moment's notice. And if you even raise the possibility, then I will show you just how little I care about it. I think that's one of those instances where both things can be true at the same time. I thought that's a valid point. Everything you just described, you're not looking for a lesbian relationship. I understand, I respect that. But at the same time, I'm the person you say you care about. I'm the person who's, fill in the blanks, sense of humor, hardworking,
Right.
ethic, you name it, whatever it is you find attractive about me. Pretty sure it's not what's going on in my pants. You're saying that's what you love, but you don't. And that's what I heard. You don't love me. That further isolated me for the 55 years that I was in the closet.
Right.
Because it wasn't a fear. It was a flat out statement. If you pursue being who you really are, I will not love you.
We divorced amicably. We're actually still friends. She's pretty much the only person left from my previous life. Kids are gone, want nothing to do with me. And I send them love, wish them a long and happy life, and let them go.
Yeah.
That's all I can do. That's the other thing that I learned to do about my thoughts. I could sit here and dwell on the fact that my children don't want anything to do with me. Does that do me any good? No. Does my feeling bad about this do them any good? No. So stop. We just have to learn to let people go. And the beauty of it is, you do meet new people. And I call that my new family.
I love the fact that almost everyone in my life has only ever known Claire. That says exactly what I was describing, that they have no idea what I was like for those 55 years necessarily. Mm-hmm. They see me for who I am, flaws and whatever good qualities there are.
Right.
And they like that, or they love that, or they respect that. And they're seeing the real me. So I'm much more comfortable knowing that.
And even when I take a friend who's known me for a few weeks to a few months and doesn't know about my past, and then I reveal it, it's like, oh, wow, I had no idea. Or what were you like then? And what was all that about? And, talk through the whole thing with them and explain how I was born, how it happened, what I've been through, a whole bit. I have yet to be rejected. And then it gets to a point where after all their questions have been answered, and we've had the conversations, and they'll come back and ask more questions, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I prefer them to ask me. Then it just becomes just a normal relationship and a normal friendship. And that's all there is to it. That's one of the things that I also know about our community is there are a lot of people that if they're asked about being born transgender, they'll say, it's not my responsibility to educate you. I firmly disagree with that. I moved into a community, New Hope, Pennsylvania, where there is a large gay community. Silly me! I thought gay community would absolutely, totally understand this. No way in hell. Chad and Jason left flowers at my front door my first Saturday night there. Chad and Jason, number 15, welcome to the neighborhood. I went down and introduced myself to them at 9 o'clock on a Sunday evening. I was told that, well, there's a running bet in the neighborhood. Is she a cisgender woman, or is she one of the cross-dressers that comes into town occasionally who decided to live here? I said, neither. I was born transgender. I'm living full-time as Wendy, and I'm doing my name change. I'm doing everything, and I'm having the surgery. I don't know when or where, and blah, blah, blah. And then I said something to them for the very first time in my life. I'm an open book. Ask me anything you want to, and absolutely nothing is off limits. Jason said, you shouldn't have said that in front of Chad. And he did.
Chad pulled out a scroll list.
Yeah. Oh, God. It was so much fun. We talked from 9 o'clock in the evening till 3:30 Monday morning. Now, there was another gay couple that lived next to them, Bob and Tony, and then there was Tom and David. 3 gay couples, a couple of cisgender couples, and then single people in an apartment. Very social street. So they said to Bob and Tony, "Oh, you got to meet Wendy. She's not like the ones that come in for the events every quarter and, you know, hang out in town dressing as women. She's doing this full time." Bob goes, "I don't want to meet her." He told me after I knew him for about 5 years, he didn't want to meet me, that people like me skeeved him out. She's in the gay community. I had a conversation with him. He was told, talk to her, ask her questions. She'll talk to you. She'll answer everything. We talked at some neighbor gathering, and then we got together one time, just the two of us, and we went through the whole conversation, and it evolved. He's been one of my best friends and strongest supporters now.
You and I had talked when we first connected about a club that I had seen a documentary about in New Hope, or
The
had
Raven.
closed now. The Raven, yeah.
Yeah, I watched them bulldoze it in end of 2018 or beginning of 2019, somewhere along there. They made it into a parking lot, just like the song.
But that's when these gay couples are describing cross-dressers coming into town. Very often, this was for the Raven. It was
Exactly
the sanctuary where you could go and sort of learn your presentation and talk to people that had similar experiences.
Exactly. I decided I wasn't going to let any of the gay community ignore me. I went and sat at happy hour at the bar at the Raven. I did that at least 3 and sometimes 4 times a week. Not to drink necessarily, but to have conversation. And when I would be talking with one of the guys, especially if I knew he'd been married before, okay, you knew at childhood you were gay, yeah. You repressed it, yeah. You got a career, you got a wife, you got a family, you got the whole bit. Yep. And then you couldn't take it anymore and you came out as gay and now here you are. And you're happy. Yeah. Said the only difference between you and me, you became a G, I became a T.
And those similarities, those things that we have in common within the community do often get bulldozed over. You know, it's a famously fractious community, and the lesbians don't trust the trans women.
Oh God.
Gays don't care for the lesbians, and on and on and on. And everybody's looking at all these new terms and saying, "Oh, it was so much easier when it was just LGB." And why not instead focus on the things we have in common and unite around them?
One of the things that also, too, you've got the WPATH medical community definition of transgender. It's somebody with a persistent need to assimilate and live in the gender assigned opposite the one you were born and assigned to. Anyway, I didn't phrase that correctly. What we've come up with now is kind of on top of that is the social construct of transgender, which includes a whole bunch of people that don't necessarily fit the medical definition. It almost feels like everybody that doesn't belong in one of the other alphabets gets dumped under the T.
But you're, non-binary, genderqueer, gender fluid, agender, all of these new terms, demi-boy, right on down the line.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it can seem overwhelming, but...
And that's one of the areas in where the straight people of the heteronormative society get totally blown away and confused. They look at it and they don't understand it. For the 5 years that I lived in New Hope, I talked to people. I actually got a job at the supermarket as a cashier. I never revealed my past. I had all my surgery, my legal identity. I didn't have my surgery yet, but I did have my legal identity and everything else changed. So I applied for the job as Wendy and I got the job. And that actually kind of blew away some of the gay people because that supermarket existed back in the 80s and 90s, and none of the girls back then would have ever dreamed of applying for a job there. I stood at that cash register day after day for probably 2 months, wondering, I wonder if anyone knows. At that point, I decided, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Everybody's treating me nicely. I learned how to make small talk with people. I'm looking, all these women are coming through my line. They look miserable. They don't want to be there. This is some chore they've got to do, and it's an annoyance and all this other stuff. So what I learned to do was compliment them. I pick a piece of jewelry or tell them I like their nails, or they just really look nice. It made a difference. They started smiling and they would interact. Then in August of 2018, I had an interview with Huffington Post in their headquarters in Manhattan. Photo shoot, 4-hour interview. On my way back on the train back to Pennsylvania, I wonder if anyone's got, nobody in New Hope's going to see that. Wrong. The article came out, and about 3 or 4 weeks later, women started coming through my line, and they would look at me and go, Wendy, I had no idea. You're amazing. So that's what I would say to them. I'm an open book. Ask anything you want to, and nothing's off limits. I'll meet you for drinks. I'll meet you for coffee. Well, let's have lunch. I'll talk to you about anything you want to know.
I think that's something that's difficult for the heteronormative community to grab, is that some people in the trans community are very much that. I'm an open book. Ask me what you want. If it's something that steps over a line, I'll just tell you that steps over a line. But not everybody is that way. And there is a large percentage of folks in this gender identity community who are profoundly introverted, and to do that would cost them more than you can put into words. And so I think that still is difficult for folks to deal with. They might want to ask a simple, friendly question, and they can feel that radiating, don't talk to me, don't talk to me, don't look at me.
Exactly.
And it's completely their right to not want to.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
But the spokesperson, but at the same time, yeah, it might help if everybody could be that open.
One thing I found is as my self-acceptance really began to improve, self-awareness and self-acceptance, those were the first things I worked on. For my entire life, I didn't know anything about self-love. I hated myself. I was miserable. I basically smoked my way through the 80s on pot. When we moved outside of Philadelphia, of course, I had no connections. Right. And my wife has suggested, see a psychiatrist, but for some meds to help with the anxiety and the depression, but don't tell him. I said, are you crazy? I wouldn't tell him anyway. That didn't work for me the last time, and nothing's changed. I spent the 90s up to 2015 on psych meds. And I learned that if I made up the right symptoms, I could get whatever I want. I was in a fog, and that's no way to live. By the time I went through 6 months of doing the mental work, also too, when I went back and forth to therapy on Thursdays, I would give myself life tests. I would make up things that I could do to put myself into public as Wendy and test something. Can I do it? Does it work? I did all kinds of little things like that.
Small, manageable goals.
I told Stephanie after therapy one day, next week I'm stopping at Dunkin' Donuts on the way here. Do you want anything? And that I focused on it. I envisioned it. I meditated on it. I wrote about it. I was all set to do it. I got in the car. I drive there. And the Dunkin' Donuts I was stopping at didn't have a drive-through, and drive-through would be cheating. I parked the car. I shut it off. I couldn't get out of I couldn't open the door. I sat there for 5 minutes. I walked in to therapy. I sat on the couch. I looked at Steph and said, I failed. She looked at me and said, no, you didn't. You'll do it when you're ready. I thought about that the entire session, and I looked at her and I said, you're right. And I'm going to be ready next week. And I was. I got out. I walked across. I heard the sound of my heels on the pavement. I stood in line with other people. I'm looking around and nobody's looking at me. And I said, oh, okay, just relax, wait until your turn. Then 2 policemen walked in behind me.
Oh, okay.
I had immediate flashbacks to New York State in 1970. In those days, I would be arrested, thrown in jail, fined, and my name in the paper. All over New York, all over California. Those are the 2 states I knew that did that. And that's why in June of 69, when Stonewall happened, it was the transsexuals and the drag queens that threw the first bricks at the cops because they were pissed off about getting arrested all the time.
But the officers in the Duncan, not a problem.
Well, I immediately said to myself, stop. This is now. They're just here getting coffee like you are. And I decided I'm just going to turn around and say, hi. And they said, hi. And that was it. They didn't know anything different about me. And it's not because I pass. It's because I've taught myself how to blend in. All the subtleties and the cues that people pick up on and the energy that you give off, all that combines to help you just blend into society as who you really are.
Last word goes to you. Tell folks how they can get in touch with you, what sorts of things they could expect.
MeetWendyCole.com. That's meet, MEET. The first button takes you to my calendar and schedule time and just let's talk. What I'm there to do is help you understand how I can help you and how we can work together and just get to know each other a little bit. My newsletter is the next button, and the bottom button takes you to my main website and dumps you into my blog where all my podcast interviews are organized. But you can go through, there's my coaching links, there's all my other, there's a navigation menu on that, and you'll find out everything you ever want to know about me.
Special thanks to Transqat's Chief Financial Officer, Sun, for sitting with me throughout almost all of the recording. I'm experimenting with introducing a video version of the show, and she was very concerned about cost overruns. You can watch Wendy and Sun and me at the Transqat channel on YouTube. An update from last season. In episode 46, I spoke with filmmakers Mauricio Pita and Christopher Cunetto about their short film, Safe Word. I love this film, and it's now available on YouTube. The link is in the show notes or on screen right now. Safe Word is about 15 minutes long. Check it out, and then maybe revisit our conversation from scene 2. Also, I am currently working as a consultant for a short film that is in production in LA. It's called Sorority, and I am so excited to see this project come to life. It's written by Ashley Gianni and Kristen Scatton, directed by Ashley. The cast is in place, and shooting begins this month. You can follow them at Sorority Short Film on Instagram, and I anticipate having Ashley, Chrissy, and hopefully some of the cast on the show with me in 2025. This has been Transqat, a safe place to stand. I'm Claire McCarthy. Thank you for listening. Let's talk soon.
This is Sadie McCarthy. I'm Claire's niece.
And you've just been listening to Transqat. It is made by one of my favorite people in the world, Claire McCarthy.
Transqat is a production of Transqat Enterprises, LLC.
Copyright 2023, all rights reserved.
Join us on the web at transqat.com.
That's TRANSQAT.com.
QAT.com.
QAT.com.
There you'll find links to Transqat, the blog,
writing projects,
speaking engagements,
and our PayPal donations page.
Please consider supporting our mission with your monkeys.
Monies.
Your monies.
Your monies.
Not monkeys.
Please consider supporting our mission with your monies. Any monkeys will be gratefully received as well.
Follow Transqat on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
On TikTok, we are at The Real Transqat.
Want to tell your story on air?
Or ask Claire a question.
What is the deal?
She has all the answers.
Or suggest a guest or topic for an upcoming episode.
Use the contact page at the website
or email her directly at crmtranscat@gmail.com.
crmtranscat@gmail.com.
And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Bye.